Mike finished with the creation in Genesis 1 and 2. It's a magnificent creation, perfectly done by God, who's also perfect, perfectly righteous. But everything in the universe at this point, at the end of Genesis 2, is God's estimation is very good. From our perspective, it was perfect. And we still benefit from some of those things that we have. I have a million functions going on in my body still to this day, and I don't have to think about them. And when one of those functions goes down, then we go down generally. We have diseases or malfunctions in our systems, but they're very elaborate systems. And the world that Adam and Eve, who are really our grandparents of everyone that's here, had an unbelievable world. They could talk with the creator of everything that was around them. They were the masters given by God of this domain of the whole universe. And they could walk and talk with him on a daily basis. It's a dream. They could go out, the environment's perfect. They didn't have to worry about food. It's growing every place. They didn't have to worry about clothing, putting it on every day. They could walk around. The climate was perfect. You could sleep. Every comfort was taken care of in this world that they lived in. But it was not meant to be. However, what we're going to talk about, the disaster that came about, is caused because of sin. And everyone thinks, oh, a little sin here, a little sin there, that's not so bad. It was a little sin that messed up the whole thing. And that we all pay a terrible price every day of our lives here. And the whole history that we have from the time of Adam and Eve has been very disastrous. However, before the creation of this world, an event took place that we know from the scriptures. There was a lamb slain before the foundation of the world, making provision what is going to take place next. God, in his omniscience, has a great plan. We don't understand it. There's a lot of things that we don't understand. Evil, disease, bad angels who are also creation. All these things God created knowing what was going to take place. So what we're going to see next in this creation in Genesis 3 is the fall of man. And it leads to a broad judgment. In the judgments we're going to study today, the worst one is this first one. It's a judgment on the universe. The next one is a judgment on the earth. And the last one is a judgment on mankind in particular, the Tower of Babel. In this beautiful world, there was only one prohibition, one test of obedience in a relationship between mankind and its maker. And that was, you can eat of everything but one tree there. And they say, well, it's an apple. We don't know what the fruit was on that tree, the tree of, next to the tree of life, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. This is going to be Genesis 3 with Romans 8, 2 Peter 3. And it's called, in the scientific point of view, we're going to see that the most powerful law that we have in science is linked to this historical event in 3. Albert Einstein felt that the law of increasing disorder, or called entropy, is first discovered in thermodynamics, but I learned later that it is the most powerful law of all science. My mentor at MIT used these two laws, the one of creation, conservation of matter and energy. Everything in the physical universe is just matter and energy. And in every interaction, then the quantity is always conserved of matter and energy. That's the quantity law. The second law is this one that takes place now, the quality law, and it says in every interaction of matter and energy, things go to some state of disorder, and the whole universe is going down. Let's review Genesis 1 and 2 as a basis of this first law of science. Matter and energy originate out of nothing during the creation events in Genesis 1. The first law of science, conservation of matter and energy, began after the sixth day of creation. Not 1 gram of matter or 1 joule of energy has been created or destroyed since the sixth day, except for miracles. It's a stunning simplicity of all of our science. And what's so stunning about this is my mentor took me from a C+ student to an A+ student at MIT, working all of the laws of science just out of these two laws. But never explained to me, and they don't have any explanation in science, why these laws are true. It's simple. You can develop your ideal gas laws, your field theories, gravitation, electromagnetism, wave propagation, mechanical laws, all out of this first law. Because almost all of our ideal laws, we call them in science, and conservation laws all derive from the conservation of matter and energy, the two components of the universe. However, the universe cannot create any of it. It can't create any matter or energy, or any energy, or destroy it. Not in no instance, and we've known this for 150 years. The first law of science is the basis of most of the laws of science, ideal conservation laws. The order of matter and energy in the universe originated during the creation. Like Mike said, we didn't start from chaos and develop to a highly ordered system of universe and life. It started with perfection and was going down from that point. And that's what this law teaches, the second law. Events recorded in Genesis 1 and 2 are not evolutionary in old universe scenario. God maintained from the time of the creation until the fall a perfect universe in perpetual motion without decay and corruption during Genesis 1 and 2. Mike said that man was designed for 1,000 years. The way it looked from the beginning, everything would have gone on forever in a perpetual state because God had an intimate relationship with man and the universe, and somehow he maintained it against this disordering law of entropy. We don't know how, but the suns wouldn't have burned out, man wouldn't have died, animals wouldn't have died, the whole universe would have gone on in a perpetual state because God is intimately involved in it and maintaining the universe somehow, like the burning bush of Moses. Remember? Moses said, look at that. That thing's not burning. Let me go over and find out. And the voice comes to him, take off your shoes. You're standing on holy ground. God was in the midst of the burning bush. He can, by miracles, put this law in abeyance without decay and corruption. Earth's plants and animals had a perfect environment. Like one guy said, they weren't just created in kinds, they were kind to each other. The animals didn't eat each other up. Everything was vegetarian. They're all herbivores. There are no carnivores in the beginning. And even man was not allowed to. They all ate plants. Great vegetarians. Now people are trying to go back to that state, but it's not going to happen. They lived in a perfect environment after the creation. There were probably 100 times more species than today. We know this from the fossil records. Living in a uniform, mild temperature over the whole earth during Genesis 1 and 2. We know that all the geological layers indicate that there's no polar zones. Everything grew in a very tropical to semi-tropical environment. Even the bottom of the Arctic Ocean, the fossil remains, the coral remains, grew in 74-degree temperature under the North Pole. The Ross Sea, the same thing. And all the layers except for the very last one, the Pleistocene, the Ice Age, all of them grew in very moderate conditions. And most of the fossils, over 90%, are marine fossils living in warm ocean waters. Celestial bodies were visible immediately after the creation because the speed of light is nearly infinite in deep space, and we'll go into that a little bit later. Other characteristics. The creation order is light, waters below and above. The firmament is between them. The waters below are then divided into land, seas with plant kingdom. Then the celestial bodies in day 4, and sea animals and birds on the 5th day, and the 6th day are land animals and man. Perfect creation by God, good and very good. I hold, and it looks like Mike mentioned that some people hold that this firmament between the waters above and the waters below. Some think that the waters above are somewhere in deep space, but that would mean the firmament, the outer space is firmament, and there's nothing firm about it. I take it that the waters above, which was also one of the sources for the flood, was a water canopy of some sort, probably vapor above the earth. And you have to realize here in the summertime it'll be 80 degrees. 5 or 6 miles up it's 50 below. But above that it's 1,300 degrees. You can hold a lot of water in that upper atmosphere. Be in a vapor form so you could see the stars and everything. So there was probably the waters above were a water canopy, and that also explains a lot of the evidence we find in the fossil world and our present world that could not have existed without. It developed an ideal worldwide climate. Distant celestial bodies were visible immediately in the young universe because of the nearly infinite speed of light in deep space. Plants and animals were according to kinds. There's a genetic wall of separation, protection between the species, so that not only does it protect the species from mixing their characteristics to survive in their habitats, but it also prevents evolutionary thinking. Garden of Eden, perfect life with a tree of life, lost in the fall. There was no rain. It was mist watered the earth. It was artesian. There was no rainbow before the flood. Man is given dominion over the natural realm. Man names the animals and doesn't forget them. Woman came from man. Marriage of one man and one woman. He didn't create two men or two women, contrary to popular beliefs. They were created by God that way for the propagation of the race. Food was vegetarian before the flood, carnivore after the flood. Fear of man and animals, there was known before the flood, that changed after the flood. God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden, Genesis 2:15. But of the tree of knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, God tells him, for in the day that you eat of it you shall surely die. Death has been with us since. The temptation of the woman. Now the serpent was more cunning than all the beasts of the field, which the Lord God had made. And he said to the woman, see, this is the ancient serpent of old. The serpent was in Satan indwelt it. Satan is an angel. We don't even talk about the angelic realm or spiritual realm, but they're called sons of God also. They're created in the image of God, but they're spiritual beings. They're not material, and they don't work with energy as we do. And he said to the woman, this is the serpent, has God indeed said, you shall not eat of every tree of the garden? The tempter always says that. Has God really said that? When you want to disobey your sin, the question is, does God really know what he's doing? Has he really told us the truth? And the woman said to the serpent, we may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God said, you shall not eat of it, nor shall you touch it, lest you die. The woman added a little bit, not to touch it, but that's probably a good thing to do too. It decreases the temptation. Every time you reach out to touch something you're not supposed to, every kid, they said not touch it, so they put out their mouth or their head to hit it. They think that's going to do it. But the woman's told that she understands that she's been told by Adam that they're not to eat of this. Then the serpent said to the woman, you shall not surely die. In fact, he's lying. Jesus said of Satan, he's a murderer from the beginning. He's the father of lies. And so lies that come, and he tells her a lie. He says, you won't surely die. He contradicts what God has said. For God knows in the day that you eat of it, your eyes will be open, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. That's one of the problems of humanism. We all want to be God. We want the universe to center on ourselves, and he's appealing to this woman. Now look at the temptation. What happens? So the woman saw, and it comes up in 1 John 5 again. The same things. What is it? The lust of the flesh. The tree was good for food. Lust of the eyes. It was pleasant to the eyes. And the tree was desirable to make one wise. Pride of life. Things haven't changed at all. Same temptations, same tricks, and same deadly consequences for all of us. She took of the fruit and ate. She gave to her husband with her, and he ate. Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they knew that they were naked. They sewed fig leaves together and made themselves coverings. They gained knowledge at this point, but it was at a terrible price of sin. He took of the fruit and ate. She also gave to her husband, and he ate. Then begins the divine inquiry. Something's changed in their mind, and they know it. And they heard the sound of the Lord God walking in the garden in the cool of the day. Had they heard this before? Yes. And they'd just gone out and talked with him and walked in the garden talking with their maker, the Lord God of the universe. Pleasant relationship they have. But what happens this time? And Adam and his wife hid themselves from the presence of the Lord God among the trees of the garden. They're ashamed now. Then the Lord called out to Adam and said to him, "Where are you?" And he said, "I heard your voice in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked and I hid myself." And he, God, said, "Who told you you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree of which I commanded you that you should not eat?" Start passing the buck. Adam says, "I'm not responsible for this. You are, God." Says, the man said, "The woman whom you gave to be with me, she gave me of the tree and I ate." So it's God who gave the woman, and the woman's fault. It's not me. She was the one that gave me the food to eat. And the Lord God said to the woman, so he turns to the woman, "What is this that you have done?" And the woman said, "The serpent deceived me and I ate." This is the divine inquiry to get to the bottom of the matter. She passes it on to the serpent as responsible. The judgments begin in the reverse order. So the Lord God said to the serpent, "Because you've done this, you are cursed more than all the cattle and more than every beast of the field. On your belly you shall go, and you shall eat dust all the days of your life. And I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel." It's interesting in this enmity, he doesn't choose Adam. He says it's enmity between the seed of the woman and the Satan's. And it's interesting in the genealogies in Luke. You have genealogies that begin there. The one in Luke, which is aimed at the Gentiles, goes back through the line of the woman back to God. And Jesus had to be born of a virgin. Why? Because he's the seed of the woman. He's the one that's going to battle and relieve man from this curse. In other words, here you have a very seminal statement of the future redemption of mankind, and it's going to come through the woman. That's why those genealogies are so important. And that's what's happened. You're going to bruise his heel, but he's going to crush your head. Judgment on the woman. To the woman he said, "I will greatly multiply your sorrow and conception. In pain you shall bring forth children. My daughter-in-law is expecting the baby very soon, and she's in great pain and distress right now before the baby's born." And all women, they try to minimize it with blocks, nerve blocks and things like that, minimize it. But birth, I haven't gone through it. This is very painful. From what my wife told me, we've had 5 children, and it's not a pleasant process. So this is being fulfilled with women today. Your desire shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you. This isn't what the feminists like to hear, but this is the way that things should be. The man should be the head of the family, and the woman should be under his, not that some women are a lot more intelligent than their men, but it's not a question of intelligence, it's a question of proper order that God has established. Judgment on the man. And he said to Adam, because you have heeded the voice of your wife and have eaten from the tree which I commanded you, saying, you shall not eat of it. Cursed is the ground for your sake. In toil you shall eat of it all the days of your life. And in fact, if it weren't for our socialistic and communist deals, if you don't work, you'd starve to death today. And God said it even in the church. Paul said, if a man doesn't work, he doesn't eat. And yet we've tried to overcome this with all of our political systems, but that's true. I mean, you go out there and the ground is cursed. It grows up weeds and thistles and thorns that it didn't grow up before. Both thorns and thistles it shall bear for you, and you shall eat of the herb of the field. And in the sweat of your face you shall eat bread. By the way, there's a blessing in this too. An idle mind is a devil's workshop. So we're called upon to work and sweat all the days of our life, but it also has a therapy for us. So in this curse, there's a blessing. Till you return to the ground, for out of it you were taken, for dust you are, and to dust you shall return. It's an epitaph that they often recite at an interment, at a burial of a person. Dust to dust and ashes to ashes. And that's what we are. God made us from the dust of the earth, and to the dust of the earth our bodies will return because of this act of sin. It seems like a small thing to eat a fruit and have these consequences, but it's going to have, it affected the whole universe. So we have death. Everyone dies except for two men in history, Enoch and Elijah.